Peter Thottam has found his way into the vanguard of one of the most significant protest movements in the history of Los Angeles, Occupy LA. Thottam has an MBA from UCLA, a law degree from Berkeley, and an undergraduate degree from Yale. He is determined to make sure the Occupy LA movement remains highly visible. Peter Thottam, welcome to LA Business Today.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Your degrees make you look like you could be part of the 1%. What do you do with all of these degrees? I bet you not even the so-called 1% have as many diplomas as you have.
No, well, I think my education and my experiences, life experiences, have given me a unique perspective on some of the social and economic justice concerns that are at the core of the Occupy movement. I've never been in the 1%. At my peak earnings potential, I might have been in the top 6%, top 8% at one point. But you know, frankly, what's happening with
you went to one of the most exclusive undergraduate schools in the United States. Then you went to Bolt at Berkeley.
I went to Goldman Sachs before law school.
Well, tell us about Goldman Sachs and your time there out of Yale.
Well, that window from college to the workplace, New York City, Manhattan, Wall Street, meeting Bob Rubin and some of the key C-level executives at Goldman, really was an eye-opening experience that laid the foundation for what would later become hardcore activism post 9/11. You know, and I think the time at Berkeley in law school was sort of a transition period where I was exposed to Pacifica Radio, KPFA up in the Bay Area, and Chomsky and a number of other things. But it was that time at Goldman, that stretch on the East Coast in the Northeast, the exposure to the establishment, blue bloods in New York, and the 1% as embodied in the investment banking partnerships in Manhattan, and the enormous wealth that they had access to and controlled. That stayed with me, and frankly has manifested itself most recently in the intensity with which I've gotten involved in the Occupy movement as a means to finally bring to light some of the incredible injustices of the last decade and what's really happening not just here in the U.S. but around the world.
Well, you are a brilliant insider, nonetheless. You've been inside Goldman Sachs. You are very well informed. I listened to you lecture a few years back at a church in Koreatown where you talked about the state of the economy before the attack on America in 2001. Mm-hmm. And during that time, you were so interesting in all the history that you knew about Wall Street. And I think that's one thing that a lot of people don't hear on a regular basis, where we were 10 years ago before 9/11. And that brings you to where you are today, organizing for the Rose Bowl parade.
It's allowed me to connect the dots. I remember that talking to Emmanuel Presbyterian, and one of the major points I made was my time as a corporate securities lawyer in Palo Alto in 1999, 2000, 2001, just before 9/11, and how I saw what was going on with the dot-com bubble as a response to the 1998 Asian market crisis, and a strong corollary was the rush to the going public of firms like Goldman Sachs who were looking to cash out. And you know, the way I've come to look at the economy and world political events, the military ventures of the U.S. Army and the Fortune 500 that it's a proxy agent for, the Wall Street banks that it's a proxy agent for, you know, since then is that these bubbles, the dot-com bubble, the real estate bubble post 9/11, they are asset bubbles that have been mostly engineered by bankers as part of this architecting of a global system with cheap labor, cheap natural resources, and a consumer society here in the United States at the very apex that has essentially been controlling the strings with which a lot of these events have taken place. The Iraq, Afghanistan occupations in particular, the bailout in 2007 and 8 with Wall Street, Bear Stearns, Lehman Brothers, AIG, all of that, Goldman Sachs, B of A, Citibank, all of it's connected.
So all of this, the Occupy movement has been, it's been gestating for quite some time.
Absolutely.
What made it finally happen?
2008 was a huge turning point. The economy collapsed. We were effectively fast-tracked to a postponed depression that had been avoided by the real estate bubble engineered by Greenspan and Company 2001-2-3 with a prime rate held at 1% below the rate of inflation. Created the biggest real estate bubble in history, $11 trillion, just residential, and then commercial. If you go globally, you're talking about north of $20 trillion in artificial wealth that was created temporarily. The collapse of that unprecedented historical bubble in 2008 was very real. And around the world, you saw unemployment rates in countries like Spain, Italy, Greece, Portugal, Egypt. Around the world, unemployment went to 30 to 40%, real unemployment rates, with many young people unable to find work. Much of that was out of sight, out of mind for the American audience, the consumer cocoon here at the top.
But it is all interconnected. While we Americans may not know as much about what's happening worldwide, and once they could see it on television, what happened in Egypt, but even what's happening now in Europe, every day, it's going to affect us.
It has affected us, and I think the uprisings, the people's movements in Spain, in Libya, Egypt, Tunisia, Tahrir Square, all around the world, happened in 2010 and 11, and basically reminded Americans about the idea of grievances being addressed by elected leaders, the idea of public space, the idea of civic dissent. The catalyst was abroad, but the unemployment reality here was very real too. We may not have had the 30 to 40% numbers that some of these countries had, but the real unemployment rate in the United States, the U6 number, was as high as 23%. And today, I think it's arguably somewhere between 20 and 25% of Americans essentially out of work or working, part-time, or people who have fallen off the rolls. That underlying structural problem is very real, and so it has fueled the takeoff of the Occupy movement.
And so it's business that's taking you to the Rose Bowl parade as number 44. It's going to be a human float.
Correct.
Led by Cindy Sheehan, whose son was killed in Iraq.
Her oldest son.
Her oldest son was killed in Iraq.
On day 3 of his time in Iraq.
And this is going to be the human float, and you've gotten a permit?
We met with the chief of police in Pasadena yesterday, and 6 other police officers. They have given us permission and 2 site locations for the staging area for the human float, float number 44, coincidentally the same as Obama's administration number, and the press conference that will conclude phase 4 of the Occupy the Rose Parade action.
And what is your message?
Well, if you go to the website, occupytheroseparade.org, you will see that there are 5 core demands. The first and most important of these is corporate money out of politics. Corporations are not people, end corporate personhood, foreclosure relief, and create quality jobs now.
And the City Council has already now voted unanimously.
On Tuesday of this week,
On
yes.
Tuesday of this week to say that, and this show will probably air later, so not this week, but this month, when it airs, we'll know that the City Council of Los Angeles becomes the first major city in the country to say that corporations shouldn't be people, and in order to keep American democracy going and not having elections bought. Do you think other cities will follow LA's lead?
I do. Prior to Tuesday, there were 30 cities and counties that had passed a resolution. Boulder, cities in Wisconsin, Vermont, etc. Los Angeles is the 2nd biggest city in the country. This is a symbolic, non-binding resolution, but it has incredibly important precedential value.
How are we different than New York?
Well, New York is where a huge portion of the 1% are clustered. LA has its billionaires and its rich elites in the entertainment industry and other parts of the regional economy. But New York is where Wall Street is headquartered. And you have incredible wealth in Manhattan. You have incredible power concentrated with that wealth. I think that Los Angeles has proven itself a leader and an example for other countries in its support, generally speaking, for Occupy LA, for the Occupy movement, and the willingness of a diverse group of politicians here in the city to recognize the social and economic justice concerns of Occupy Wall Street and Occupy in general, and to try to...
Is our economy more diverse here than New York's? Is that also why you think that politically LA can do this and New York doesn't?
I think that's true. I think that there's an ethnic diversity, a class diversity, a economic foundation diversity to the Los Angeles region, the basin here. There's no single industry that underpins this region's economy the way that finance sort of controls New York. Wall Street controls New York to an extent. Bloomberg is the mayor of New York. He comes from a Wall Street background. He's a multi-billionaire. Mayor Villaraigosa has his groundings in UTLA and the teachers movement and union organizing.
So very different political dynamic in Los Angeles, and yet Los Angeles still remains very competitive with New York as far as the GNP, how many jobs are created here, and a very, very diverse and dynamic
and innovative
economy.
Region, absolutely. And hopefully that will continue to be the case as we move forward. But the unemployment rate in LA is soaring, and there are people hurting. I've been at Occupy Los Angeles before the encampment was shut down. I was there 27 days, slept overnight there 3 nights. I met at least 20 people, 20 different people who came to Occupy LA talking about their foreclosure problems, their homes being foreclosed on, many of whom were solid middle-class people who couldn't find work and were essentially out in the streets now. There was one lady who had children that she brought with her, and she cried. And that very real human set of issues is something that Occupy has brought certainly to the leadership, to the attention of City Council here in Los Angeles, but I think to the country at large. The spotlight is focused now on unemployment, foreclosure issues, economic and social justice concerns in a way that wasn't true prior to September 17th, before Occupy Wall Street took off. And I think that focus is absolutely critical to figuring out how do we move forward in this country and deal with what is essentially a mass depression, engineered in part by these Ponzi schemes set up by these Wall Street banks.
Do you think that other folks will join, other very high-profile people will join in at the Rose Bowl as part of this human float that you're putting together?
I certainly hope so. We have Cindy Sheehan on board. We are working, I called Jello Biafra from Dead Kennedys today, working on Gore Vidal. We're trying to approach Ralph Nader, Ron Kovic, and Bill Moyers. We want to get 1 or 2 other keynote speakers to be there with Cindy as we march on behalf of the 99% to Pasadena City Hall, which is where the second site location is that the Pasadena Police Department has given us. So we think it's going to be an extraordinarily important and successful action. In 2008, we did something similar, focused on the anti-war movement and the impeachment movement. We had 440 activists then. We're hoping for thousands of activists, Occupy supporters, to join us in Pasadena January 1st and 2nd, to send a message to Americans that there's a paradigm shift going on, that the concerns of a shrinking middle class are extraordinarily important and need to be heard by politicians and by leaders and regular American citizens throughout the country, so that we can figure out how we're going to solve these problems now and build a foundation from which America can reemerge as a vibrant, strong, dynamic economy that every American can be proud of.
Peter, thank you so much for coming on LA Business Today.
Sure.
We look forward to hearing how things go at the Rose Bowl Parade.
Pleasure.
We look forward to,
Thank you
hopefully we'll have you back soon.
Thanks, Sharon. Thanks for the opportunity.
You're watching LA Business Today.